I'm Max Keiser, and this is the Keiser Report, the blazing war around the world of savers versus speculators. Stacy Herbert, tell me more.
Max, that is the big theme this year, and we see it in the currency war. We see it through the whole emergence of the G20 replacing the G8, these creditor versus debtor nations.
Yeah.
The first headline, however, knee pads in tow. Moody's responds to Daegong's downgrade of the U.S. by upgrading China.
Daegong?
Yes, well, Moody's upgraded China, but this is 2 days after China's new state credit rating agency, Daegong, downgraded the U.S., and they wrote, the downgrade reflects America's deteriorating debt repayment capability and drastic decline of the government's intention of debt repayment.
Gosh, I wish Daegong were around 10 years ago or 15 years ago. They would have given Lehman Brothers a poor rating instead of Moody's giving it an A+ rating. They would have given Bear Stearns a poor rating instead of Moody's giving it a high rating. They would have given all these credit default swaps and mortgage-backed securities bad ratings instead of Moody's giving it high ratings. Moody's, S&P, Fitch, in bed with the devil on Wall Street. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, the fund managers, the five fingers of death with their hand around the throat of the global economy, killing the life out of it, choking it to death. Daegong, let's say make Daegong president of the United States. Get rid of Obama.
Well, speaking of Obama, here's the headline. China may be bigger economy than U.S. within 2 years. This is on a purchase power parity, so it's not in dollar terms, but in terms of what they could buy with that income.
PPP.
So, but notice the photo in this headline. Obama is bowing to Hu Jintao. This is the relationship that is very important to understand. Debtor versus creditor, saver versus speculator.
That's my boy. Bowing before Hu Jintao.
You know, also the U.S., of course, operates on a trickle-down sort of thing. Well, I have some photos from the U.S. as well, and you see it trickling down, this whole knee pad mentality. And see this little picture of this baby here? Babies are practically being born with knee pads on, all the way up to old age. Here's two old people running around in their knee pads.
Well, Jim Rogers, his kids are learning Mandarin. He was ahead of the curve on this.
Yeah, I bet his kids don't have knee pads.
No, they stand up tall to their Chinese occupiers.
So, as you know, I was showing these photos of the trickle-down knee pad-diem.
Yes.
Headline reads, millions of Britons living beyond their means. So this is a new survey, and it found that almost 7 million Brits are living beyond their means and refuse to alter their lifestyle despite the recession. Roger Edwards, who conducted this survey, found that even in an age of austerity, the public's spending shows no sign of waning, as the average UK adult continues to spend beyond their means and rack up debt. Worryingly, this is mainly due to the average salary being far short of that needed to lead a comfortable life.
Well, David Cameron did a means testing over there in the UK. What he found out is that nobody has any means.
Well, exactly. So the people are going into debt because they can't even afford the basic services and food and water and basic ingredients of life.
Yes, this is the same in the U.S., isn't it? In other words, the producers are in other countries and the consumers are in the U.S., and they've been able to keep this state of disequilibrium alive for decades by artificially cheap interest rates brought to you by the financial terrorists Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke. I say bring back a man like tall Paul Volcker. You see, that's the only solution. America, back in 2007, they could either have gone Austrian hard money or Keynesian soft money. Paul Volcker, of course, back in the 70s, chose hard money, quick 3-year recession followed by epic growth. Right now, we've got policymakers that are choosing Keynesian, which means a big marshmallow pie of nothingness and continued lost decadeness.
And the one thing you see is always the ruling class, the elites, the bankers, always do well. And it's the populations that turn on each other. So in the U.S., you see, the red team, the Republicans are in, and it's a lot to do with older people And the reason why these older people voted them in is because they think that the Republicans will actually maintain government health care, i.e. Medicare. But they want it cut for the poor people, Medicaid. And you see this kind of dynamic working out in the UK when we had all these protests, student protests in London, Conservative headquarters attacked. Yes, that is Millbank Tower, which was Conservative headquarters. David Cameron was seen cowering in the corner of his office.
Dave Cameron, suppository salesman from the Tory party, cowering under his desk while students showed up demanding they have these debts repudiated, as they rightly should. Remember, when the UK introduced the fees to begin with for university students, they called it top-up fees. It sounded so benign. Oh, a little top-up fee. That's gone up every year since then. Now it's draconian. The students are right. Go down there, show Dave Cameron you mean business.
Well, the interesting thing about this as well is that it wasn't reported in the press, but I did receive tweets from people who were there, and they were saying that...
Did you get my tweet, by the way? I tweeted you.
No, I didn't. But MI5 apparently had barricaded themselves in behind
MI5?
Yes, the security services.
Isn't that James Bond's outfit?
No, that's MI6. Max.
Oh, okay.
But MI5 is the equivalent of the FBI, but in the UK. And they apparently barricaded themselves in. But let's move on to the next headline, because let's see where they're heading towards in the UK. They're fighting the austerity measures, of course, in the UK. And what we saw previously is Greece already had their austerity measures. And what did it do? It sent a spiral, yes. So revenue is down drastically, and the deficit keeps rising because revenue is collapsing. People are losing more and more, and it's deflationary spiral. You're seeing that in Ireland. Last rights for Ireland. And that's a pretty dramatic photo from this MaxKeiser.com headline. The photo caption reads, Irish government's, slash that through, IMF's new austerity measures. And the picture shows a dramatic...
a steel ball being crushed by the IMF austerity vice. Hello, Argentina! Let me just point out that Brazil, of course, a few years ago, they said to the IMF, hey, go pound sand. We don't want your stinking money no more. And of course, they're doing brilliantly well now. And the countries who take the IMF money mean it's effectively taking money from Tony Soprano and a bunch of Goombas over there in New Jersey.
So going back to Ireland anyway, Max, a plan is in development to sort out the Irish problem, to provide a Greek-style bailout to Ireland, according to Handelsblatt, a German newspaper. So apparently all the rumors are that there's a big bailout coming.
Yeah? Well, of course. That's what they live for, big bailouts, because they get the fees. They don't actually provide anything useful to your economy. Don't let those financial terrorists at the IMF in.
Well, this is the pattern that we saw in the third world and the developing world for much of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is the likes of Citibank would go into Argentina, lend out lots of money. They would go into the World Bank, lend out lots of money to the dictators. The dictators would flee with the cash. The population was left with the debt. They would go bankrupt. The IMF would come in, make whole those debts to the Citibanks of the world, and the population was left with it. So the IMF is the bagman. It comes in to sweep up. It's the sweeper.
Yeah, the cleaner. If you watch your mafia movies, the guy
I knew it was something
mops
like that.
the blood up from the floor.
Yes.
I saw that in a recent episode of some show about gangland killings in America. The cleaner.
One of the architects of this whole thing that we see or find ourselves in.
Dr. Mengele? No, who is it?
Close to it, Alan Greenspan.
Oh.
Now I want you to look at this little video of what he says about the problem with the global financial system at the moment.
There are two fundamental reforms that we need is to get adequate capital, and two, to get far higher levels of enforcement of fraud statutes. Existing ones, I'm not even talking about new ones. Things were being done which were certainly illegal and clearly criminal in certain cases, which, fraud is a fact. Fraud creates very considerable instability in competitive markets. If you cannot trust your counterparties, it won't work. And indeed, we saw that it didn't.
Well, Alan Greenspan is a dork. and a financial terrorist. He should be up on war crimes. But basically, all the problems that the result of the Fed's artificially keeping interest rates low have resulted in the growth of fraud. In other words, you need to disincentivize fraud. You need to make the cost of money high enough so that the risks associated with borrowing to start your fraudulent activities are diminished. If you make the price of fraud so cheap that any Goomba can borrow billions and start anything crazy scheme that they can concoct in their diseased mind, like a Bernie Madoff, and that if they get caught, they either go to some celebrity country club jail or pay a small civil fine or get put on the cover of some Time magazine, then you're not going to stop the fraud, are you?
Well, importantly, earlier in the year, we covered the fact that Brooksley Born was fired, forced out of government by Alan Greenspan and Larry Summers because she wanted to regulate against fraud. She was shocked to learn that Alan Greenspan told her over lunch that he believes the markets are better at regulating fraud and he is against it. So now he's saying oops when he's safely away with his pension fully intact.
Yeah, and he's working for over there at PIMCO with Bill Gross, advising PIMCO, a notorious frontrunner and insider trader. So the guy's making money doing fraudulent activities while in office, out of office. He probably can't go to the bathroom without committing some fraudulent activity.
Thankfully, my final note here, this was sent in by a viewer of the show who actually is using one of these Max Keiser gold coins. Here's a picture of that.
I sent an email to Medvedev and I said, put my picture on the new Russian global gold coin. Now, I haven't heard anything back yet.
And then finally, Max,
yeah.
Those gold coins, those Max Keiser gold coins might come in useful for the final savers versus speculators, debtor versus creditor, bubble of all. Jeremy Grantham, the Fed is creating its last bubble.
Dum, dum, dum.
So he said to Maria Barra Taroma,
what I worry about most is the Fed's activity, and QE2 is just the latest demonstration of this. The Fed has spent most of the last 15, 20 years manipulating the stock market whenever they feel the economy needs a bit of a kick.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the basic point, is that the banks have committed all manner of embezzlement and fraud in the U.S. and in the UK. And to accommodate for that fraud, the Federal Reserve has expanded its balance sheet by trillions to try to swallow that fraud. Why they did that is really hard to figure out, because all they've done is effectively thrown the entire American economy under the bus. Which is what the rest of the world is saying now. They're saying we don't want any more dollars. There's now a currency war going on, and the U.S. is holding, the worst hand at the currency poker table. All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away. Much more coming your way. All right, welcome back to the Keiser Report. Let's now go to New York City and talk with money manager Michael Krieger. You can find Michael's work at the fabulous website zerohedge.com. That's the site to go to these days for all the insider stuff. And also maxkeiser.com. Michael posts to my site as well. Michael Krieger, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Max, great to be back. Thanks for having me.
All right, Michael Krieger, talk to me about Robert Zoellick. He's calling for a debate right now on a return to the gold standard. He's talking about gold. What's going on? Has he lost his mind?
Yeah, no, I think this is just another piece of evidence in a broader theme that I've actually been writing about, which is that many of people in enormous positions of power and wealth in the United States, and indeed in the Western world at this point, are being forced to address certain issues that people in the alternative media like ourselves have been discussing for years and years and years now. And the first one that I mentioned was Bill Gross. I wrote about this 2 weeks ago, how he even mentioned that the Treasury market is a Ponzi scheme, and that's what Bernanke was doing. So I think Zoellick is just another example of someone having to address us on our terms, or people that want reform in the system on our terms. For example, we're not changing our level of conversation. We continue to hammer down on these points: gold, Glass-Steagall, financial reform, real financial reform, and they keep trying to push back and just pretend we don't exist. But I think this acknowledgement that the market is saying that gold matters is a huge victory for the alternative media, for people that want reform, for a change to the financial system. So that's really how I see it. even if he doesn't mean it, even if he's just throwing it out there as a bone to sort of appease us, it's still a victory.
Right. Well, in fact, the world's been on a gold standard since the beginning of time. It's just a question of how badly the number of fiat currency Ponzi scheme wielding derivative nincompoops have been allowed to inflate their mountain of paper versus the underlying supply of gold. And then periodically sanity comes back into the equation, and gold is once again used as a reference point for currency transactions. And paper bugs like Joe Wiesenthal over there in BusinessInsider.com are just disappear from the face of the earth. Now, Michael Krieger,
Right.
talk to me about the U.S., because they stand to be the big loser in a post-U.S. dollar fiat currency reserve note world.
Well, that's exactly why I haven't analyzed the zealot comment in too much detail, just because the U.S. pushback to that would be extraordinarily extreme. And so, yes, we do have, of course, the most to lose. We can print money out of thin air and buy resources with it and fund our military and essentially have the empire. So yes, of course, the U.S. has the most to lose in the short term, but actually, in the long term, assuming that we have the 8,000 tons of gold that we ostensibly have, we actually have a lot to gain in terms of liberty, in terms of a free market, in terms of a cultural renaissance. So actually, in the long run, this would be the best thing to just happen, so we can get to reality. I think in the long run, having a fiat currency empire, which would then translate into a gulag police state, of course, because the small few that have everything would need to suppress the many that are being fleeced, essentially. That would be the worst case situation in the long run. So for the elite that have everything, it's of course a bad thing. But I think for the general population, myself included, it's a great thing. I don't want the empire. I don't want the fiat currency standard. I think it's bad for the world, and it's bad for the average citizen in America.
Let's talk mathematics here for a second. People say, oh, there's not enough gold to create a gold standard. Of course, failing to take into accommodation that there's something called the price discovery mechanism, so the price would rise to the level where you could have effectively a gold standard. Jim Rickards, again, he says that if his estimation is, if you look at the amount of fiat currency in a measure like, I think he uses M1 to do his calculation, divided by the above surface tonnage of gold, he comes up with a price of around $5,000 an ounce to create a clearing mechanism. Is this, or do you see that as a possible number, or higher?
I think when I've sort of thought about things in my head based on a lot of different calculations I look at, 5,000 to 10,000 seems like where I think things are going to stop. Of course, I think the Dow will be at an equal level. So if gold goes to 5,000, the Dow will go to 5,000. If gold gets to 10, the Dow will get to 10. So I do believe in that 1-to-1 ratio. As far as trying to back currencies by gold from a bureaucratic or political level, I don't really have a strong opinion on that, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because what always ends up happening, as you know if you read history, is a government will come out and say, oh, well, our currency is backed by gold and you can convert it at this price. Well, within 10, 15, 20 years, they cheat, they lie, they print too much, and then all of a sudden you can't convert. So I'm more in favor of this idea of a free market money system where, others have talked about this, where through the use of, let's say, goldmoney.com or digital gold grams, right, as long as you allow legally people to transact in gold or silver, whatever they want, that's what I think is the best answer. That people can decide, okay, well, I want payment in gold, and you can pay, you could transfer gold grams from here to there, or in silver, or whatever. But I just don't love the idea of the let's say politicians taking control of this debate. I think we need to keep this debate where it is, which is free market money. And whatever the market determines it wants to transact in, let it transact in that. If they want to transact in dollars, fine. If they don't, fine. But don't tax the transactions if you want to do it in another form, a commodity form. That's where I come down on this.
Yeah, well, it seems some bright brokerage firm on Wall Street will jump into the mix here. I mean, I remember, I think it was in the 70s when Merrill Lynch introduced their CMA account, I think it was called, where they sweep all of the available funds into a money market. And this was the bulwark that turned them into a giant for that period. Now, what about a money market account, effectively, that's gold bullion? As a matter of fact, I talked to James Turk about this personally in a lengthy conversation when he came through Paris a couple of years ago. And over there at goldmoney.com, they're exploring this possibility, but to have essentially a gold money market. So all you're doing is dealing in gold bullion. You approach the gold standard from that end. You make it a free competitive market. If you want to own gold, silver, or some other fiat currency, you have that option.
Precisely. So think about it, right? The big knock against gold was really, one of the big knocks was, oh, well, you have to carry all these big heavy coins in your pocket. That's ridiculous, right? Most of our transactions are not in cash right now anyway. We're doing digital transactions. So if you have digital gold that is audited, and then you transfer that from one party to another, that to me makes the most sense, right? You don't have to carry pieces of coin in your pocket at all. But you do have, at least you know when you're on the other side of a transaction, that you know that you're getting transferred X grams to your account that is audited. And that's what I think we should be thinking about. So I don't like the idea. That's why the Zellick thing, I don't like the idea of the politicians now co-opting gold, let's say, right? And then coming up with a new fake fiat currency that they proclaim is backed by gold. Then within 5-10 years, it's not anymore. And they're like, well, that didn't work out for us, so now we're back to a fiat SDR or something. I think this is something we need to be very vigilant on and not allow them to tell us what money is. We can decide for ourselves what money is.
Now let me change gears here for a second, or actually stay on the same topic, my favorite topic, gold. Over there at zerohedge.com and the gang, Tyler Durden and Marla Singer and those folks, they seem to have some real good information about what's happening in the banking sector. And of course, their site is a wild success. But let me ask you something here. You've got recently the CME, who's raising margin requirements for silver position holders. And it looks like a direct, attempt to thwart this rising tide of silver ownership by what I call the gold and silver vigilantes, guys like John Embry up in Canada and Sprott Asset Management, who have made it their mission to take physical delivery and to bust the CME and to bust the COMEX. Who's going to win in this epic battle? Is it going to be the vigilantes, or is the CME and the COMEX and the same corrupt regulatory thugs going to prevail again? Who are you picking in this fight?
Look, I think it was a sign, just like QE2 was a sign of desperation from the Fed. What the CME yesterday did was to me a sign of desperation. Yeah, silver was going up $1 a day. It looked like it was going to 30 to 35, et cetera. And yeah, there were people on the other side of that position. There were probably people with influence at the exchange on the other side of that position. So with a dollar rally, and people like to set up these trades to cause lemmings in the financial industry to say, oh, well, that's an outside day reversal plus the dollar's strong. This means that's a silver top. That's what they're trying to create so that the shorts can weasel their way out of their positions. As far as I'm concerned, they cannot win, in my opinion, because every single day, thanks to shows like yours, thanks to Zero Hedge, thanks to people writing about it, more and more people, and I can tell you this for a fact because I have a very big email list and I talk to people. Every single day, it's exponential, the awareness and the amount of people that are fighting back, buying the physical, taking physical delivery. The silver market is tiny. There's nothing that they can do. Zero. As far as gimmicks and trades, yes, but the big lesson to me here was don't trade on the COMEX. Why are you doing that anyway? I think it's a losing battle. You buy physical silver, you take delivery, or you do it through gold money, or you buy the equities, the silver mining companies. But COMEX, you're going to get fleeced eventually, and you're playing their game. It's bad karma in some ways.
Well, I remember during the 1980s, you had two things going on. You had the Greenspan put, which is to say every time stock markets traded down, Greenspan would lower interest rates to make it cheaper to buy stocks. And B, there was the mantra that everyone followed, buy the dips. That was the answer to everything. Right. What's the market doing? Buy the dips. So I would say the same thing. Right. You've got the Beijing put. Every time gold comes in, China's going to buy it because they've got to hedge themselves against this fiat currency garbage US dollar plague and buy the dips. Take the same approach and take those shorts out on a stretcher.
I wrote in a piece 2-3 weeks ago that said this: if every adult American bought 1 ounce of gold, one ounce, okay, that's 7,000 tons. That's Fort Knox. That's 2.8 times global annual mine supply.
Yeah, well, look, let me just jump in here for a second because there's that campaign out there in the U.S. where to move your money from the money center bank to your local bank. That's nonsense because the big money center banks are just going to end up buying those smaller banks anyway through consolidation. If you really want to kick the banks and the gonads, you've got to go out and buy an ounce or a silver or an ounce of gold today, right now.
Yeah, it's the Achilles heel of the entire corrupt Ponzi scheme financial system is the precious metals markets, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Once you figure it out and you don't like it, you will act upon it, and ultimately the paper Ponzi scheme system collapses. And I wrote this 2 weeks ago, and I don't know, you may disagree with me, but I believe that our side of the battle is winning now. I believe that we've crossed the Rubicon. Yeah, it's no longer a fight, So that's a big deal, and I think it will be won. But 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month ago, no, it was more evenly matched. And yeah, the fact that Bill Gross is talking this way, the fact that Zoellick is talking this way, the fact that a lot of folks out there, it's not just them, are talking this way is a sign.
Zoellick is a career bureaucrat who'll hitch his wagon to any himself to any wagon that's moving forward. He's just a salon monkey. He has no intelligence. He's just going with the trend. Zoellick, he's nothing. We got to wrap it up there, Michael Krieger. Thanks again for being on the Keiser Report.
Thanks, Max. Always a pleasure.
All right, if you want to find Michael's work, you can find him at zerohedge.com or maxkeiser.com. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.